Thank you. I'm very glad to be here, to be back here. It's all we're going to agree with each other too much, so I just want to start with disagreeing with a few things with Peter, because that leads to better discussion, better argument. And I was just thinking about that need for disagreement when you were talking about New Zealand and the great model, and there was this young civil servant I know, not that high level, who told me last year, he said he'd been in New Zealand, co-opted into the New Zealand civil service, and he wasn't a very high level, but he was the oracle. They literally wheeled him right up to the top Secretary General because he had experience of what Ireland was doing so well. And yes, we just have to be slightly careful in terms of we're down at the moment. But if we just completely write ourselves down, we miss some of the good things that are in this country. I have to disagree with you with that. I would also disagree with you in terms, I agree with you, we need dual reform, we need Shannon reform even more, we need electoral reform possibly, I'd come to that. But I don't think they're the top reforms. If we're going to talk about, if we're going to get the nuance right here, say, what's our priorities? What's the key reforms we need? And I think they're these key questions. Have we the will to change the way we vote? Have we the will, as you say, I would agree with you on this, to transfer power from the centre down to the local? And I'd say the third one, have we the will to change the permanent government? It's my three priorities in terms of political reform. I'll just go into each of them in turn, if I can, in the brief time that we have available to us. We can agree there's need for reform, that we are in a crisis and our political system has failed us and got us into that crisis, and therefore, yes, we need reform. And yes, we need honesty to look to see where there's corruption, to weed it out, but the real honesty we need is, yes, what we in the political system are promising our people, and what our people are looking for from their politicians. That's, I think, where the first most important honesty we need to have. And that came, in my mind, reading J. Lee recently, actually in advance of this occasion, it did almost come from that previous experience, 18th, 19th century, when a remote power from Ireland, actually be fearful of revolt, bought us off with kindness, as much as they could. And at the same time, we, in trying to bring back power to ourselves, developed the first mass democratic movement based on a ward-based political system, which we were the best at. Anywhere we set it up, in any American or other city, we took over because we were bloody good at it. And in a sense, I think what happened in the 20th century is we imported some of those two traditions and actually deployed it, even though there had been a change of the rulers, as it were, that there was a continuation of what we had become comfortable with, what we had become used to. And it's that clientist, localised political system that you've just been talking about. Some people might call it corrupt, but you can't, because it's what the Irish people have democratically voted for. We have to respect the fact that Irish people decided in a democratic fashion that's the politics they want. And yes, as you say, you're voting for your local person, knowing that maybe that the figures, the promises don't add up, but just hoping that you're the one who grabs the long straw and that you get the bigger bit of the pie for your local area. It's an understandable trait. But again, if we're being honest, I think now, we can see that that voting system doesn't work. If it ever did, it certainly hasn't worked now for us. And it's one of the reasons why we're in the crisis that we're in. Fianna Fáil have been the most successful Irish political brokers of all. And through its history, I would acknowledge it has had real social and economic achievements to its name, as well as real failings, which typically come when you're a long time in power. But no amount of school building grants, or funds for football pitches, or housing allocations, or medical card allocations, or planning permissions were going to protect Fianna Fáil, or indeed my own party, when the economic crisis and that loss of confidence occurred in the parts of the government at the last election. It was ironic, in a sense, that the crisis, which I believe in part was caused by the spending that was raised, particularly in advance of the two previous elections, was actually, it was caused by that patronage system that we vote for. That kind of taking our money to give us back our money, but in such quantities that it threw us into an economic crisis. Fine Gael and Labour have shown that they have the exact same electoral instinct. I don't know what Enda Kenny or Eamon Gilmore were doing in the last year when they promised a whole load of different things that they knew they couldn't deliver. Hospitals, whatever. Any child with kind of political analysis would say, you don't have to do anything, lads. You just sit there pretty, the votes are going to come to you. But in Irish politics, there's a certain pragmatism that maybe a child doesn't have. lessons learned over centuries and handed down, that if you want to get elected, if you want to get that quota of 8,000 votes, you need to tell that large constituency who want to hear what they want to hear, or want to hear that you're going to be able to give them something that they think that the state mightn't otherwise give them. Fine Gael, Labour practice the exact same. The reason I don't think that an electoral reform will necessarily change that underlying symptom, underlying culture, is if you look at Sinn Féin and DUP, past masters of this model, and in a completely different electoral system. But it's PR, first past the post, it's the same approach that has been applied. And that's why I'm not so sure we could spend our whole time designing some fancy electoral system. If we don't change the underlying culture, it's not going to work. I agree with what has been said, though, previously by the three previous speakers, that if we are going to change that fundamental culture, it does require a fundamental change in the relationship between the voter and the body politics, involving greater participation, particularly. The solution to our democratic ills, I suppose the basic viewpoint coming from our party, lies with greater democracy, not less. We need to strengthen that public involvement, not just reform the professional political system. Bringing people closer to the decision-making process, I would agree with the three previous speakers, is the best way of then getting understanding what our resources, how do we develop them, and how do we deploy them. And I think the way the citizens has been really beneficial in showing one model of how you get such participation to work. And I think, okay, yes, we can lose it. David, you mentioned a whole range of constitutional issues where you could deploy it. What I believe we should be deploying it now, what I am calling for the government here today to do, is to start deploying it in a real-life local government approach where it could have, in my mind, huge benefits. I want to give one example. From my perspective, the big opportunity for this country at the moment, one of the big changes going to happen, is to develop a whole new renewable energy system. It has the potential to be the biggest uplift to this country since that lovely period in the early 60s when we opened up our country. It gives us security, energy security, which is critical for generations to come. The biggest obstacle to it is actually getting people in the planning system, and people know this in Donegal, to agree to some of the infrastructure we need to make it happen. The grids, wind farms and so on. That's the biggest block. That's the only. Economics makes absolute sense. Finance available, even in our stricken circumstances. It's the local politics, the local planning is the biggest difficulty. So why not take that specific example? Why not take a couple of counties and say, okay, we're going to deploy this model. We're going to go in at the ground, first stage, before we go this big grid development, which we have to do, and we're actually going to use this participative model using some of the techniques that you have developed and random samples of individuals with different experts, different people, different views, to actually, as you say, do a working model. And such a process would complement, as you say, rather than replace the local government and planning process. Such a system would allow the community to work out what the community benefit is from any development. Such a system would give the developer real benefit because with planning certainty you bring down your costs. The biggest cost of capital in such projects is the risk uncertainty on planning. You reduce that, we reduce the cost of everything. And such a system, as I said, could be introduced by the government within months. And they should do it now. Such a system could work, in my mind, on a regional, county and district level. And it's the second. If I say, okay, that first three changes, first one for me is, yes, changing the culture of the Irish voter. Tricky one, but participation is one of the ways of doing it. Second one is changing local government. And I believe we need to go changes in all three of those structures. And we were working in government on this. One of the most advanced pieces of work we had done, we weren't able to sign it off, was a white paper on local government reform. Cabinet subcommittee set up, like Sir Noel Dempsey, Eamon Ryan, myself, John Gormley, Pat Carey, one or two others. We did a lot of work on it. It recommended a number of things. It didn't go to government for sign-off, it was very close to it. First one was a change to our regional democratic structures. We came to the conclusion, after a lot of consideration, there was a lot of experience in making these decisions, that we needed 5 regional structures. I won't go to county by county. I have a map that unfortunately I didn't get my PowerPoint up in time. I was late. But I can show it to people later. We can meet in the bar and have a talk about which counties should go where. It's good fun. 5 regional authorities. South West, Cork, Kerry, Clare, you can think of them. South East, Connacht and Donegal, a lot of common cultural and other issues, advantages, challenges. East and Dublin, 5 regional areas. Centres use these authorities as centres for the strategic development, environmental services, waste services, transport, planning services. Because with that you have sufficient scale. We have regional structures at the moment, but they don't work. They're not working. We need to change them. But with these new authorities, you have real scale and expertise in Connacht and Donegal that's deployed, and at the same time is in contact with what's happening on the ground. The election of the mayor in Dublin was critical as a first step in actually putting a political head of this new regional structure system, with the view of extending it outwards to each of the 5 regionals. We would have had it by this autumn. And what we would have had, and I come from experience of being a local councillor in Dublin, is a system that didn't work because you had so much inter-county rivalry, so much interagency rivalry, that it never actually got solved. With this structure, it's solved because the decisions end at a political desk. And again, the government has shelved the mayoral bill, but they need to come back to it, they need to do it, if they're serious about local government reform. As well as working on such a regional structure, the group saw further fundamental, radical, necessary and ultimately sensible change to actually develop a district tier of local government, to take the town council system, which doesn't work. It's outdated. It was designed for a horse and cart world, where now the person who actually lives in the town might live 5 miles out the road or even 10 miles out the road. We all know that. So it needs to go back towards a much more district system of local government and actually delivery of services, and in my mind extending services for local government into education and policing at that district level, really strengthening local district government. Third key element was in those existing county councils to actually elect full-time Cathaoirleach for the 5-year term and give them real powers and with that real responsibilities. There's a real gap in our democratic systems that for certain key projects now, county managers making decisions with no democratic accountability. And if we're serious about strengthening and reforming our democracy, that's one of the changes we need to make right away. We did a lot of work on this. The paper was ready to go pretty much. It was recognised that it was going to be difficult. It would take a long time to deliver, 3 or 4 electoral cycles just to wean off one system and wean into another one. It would see a diminution in the role of the existing county councils as power came up and as power went down to the district tier and up to the regional tier. However, it was remarkable in my mind in the consultation we did on it and the discussions were done on it, fairly extensive, how little opposition there was coming from about these proposals. Because there's a common understanding that of all the things that aren't working in a democratic system, people concentrate the Dáil so much in the Seanad, it's actually at a local level where we need to change. So this government, if it's serious about political reform, the test is what it does on local government. If they're going to get extra Dáil time, great, but it should be used to actually print local government reform legislation and get it through the Dáil in the time for the next local elections of 2014, so we have serious change by then. Not that we're going to be thinking about it for the 2020 or 2019 time frame, which would otherwise be the case. If they're serious about it, it starts in 2014 with how we vote for local authorities, how we vote for new local district authorities, how we vote for new regional authorities, how we vote for directly elected heads of our area. Third last change I want to talk about, I'm conscious about time, is, as I said, maybe this is the most difficult one, how we change our public service. Slightly controversial, called it the permanent government humour. At the foundation of the state, we were lucky as well. Okay, we inherited that tradition, that voting culture, but we also at that time refurbished our civil service, and it was one that had probity at its core, very fortunately. With that, there's a certain conservative streak I think anyone who's worked closely with the public service would recognise. And I suppose there's a risk when we start talking about local government, or reform of the public service itself, that conservative streak will get in the way of the change that people in the system and outside the system, I think all agree, needs to take place. We need to make the change, not just to get the efficiencies from the Croke Park deal, but also to inspire the very many Very many, I'd have to say, Peter, good people in our system, real skilled people, well motivated. Let's not do everyone down in this difficult crisis that we're in. Because they are frustrated, they need inspiration. They're frustrated by the glacial period it takes to move people around in our system, by the fact that real excellence isn't recognised as quickly as it should be, and neglect is not punished as it should be. It was interesting, I saw Martin Fraser was appointed yesterday, enough people saw it in the news, as the new Secretary-General to the government, and I wish him the very best of luck. And I would humbly suggest one or two changes, if I can, to use this opportunity from my experience in my time of government. Firstly, if he's to develop a new cadre of young officials who are to be given the freedom to take risks and to innovate in the public service, which is what we need to do, then I believe he has to bring that cadre of officials from both local government and central civil service together in the planning, in the training and development of them. Let's not create this separation that exists. Let's bring flexibility between our local public administration system and our central civil service system. That is a change he should instigate. Secondly, I believe, we should allow our civil servants speak to the media. You speak about openness. Why not have civil servants speak to the media? The myth that was set up in the original Minister and Secretaries Act in 2003, or 1903, or 1923, I think, whatever year it was, that the Minister is the only one who is the body corporate and is entitled to speak about matters in the department. I think we can leave that behind. I think we can have our civil servants speaking to the media in an appropriate fashion. Thirdly, and most seriously, we should never, ever again have a decision taken of any significance on a project or a policy approach in the interregnum between the time an election is called and a new government is formed. Let us stop that practice for good here and now and commit to it forever and a day, because it's not right. We need specialists in our civil service as well as generalists. People know that. I want to disagree with one of the recent review papers that one of the Department of Finance said that we should leave the sectoral policy unit where it is. This is the policy analysis in the Central Department of Finance. I don't agree. My experience where you had often 2 or 3 policy approaches in critical economic issues, 4 of us saying one thing, finance saying a different thing, a line department saying a different thing. We have limited resources. We should take the people out of those 2 units, sector unit and finance, and 4 of us, and put them into the line departments, which needs the expertise. And in doing that, there's less risk you've got this policy split where people might decide, well, if I can't get my way, I'm going to make sure no other way happens. So I would disagree with that recommendation in that report, and I would move the sectoral policy unit out to each of the line departments. And I suppose with a certain, again quoting J.J. Lee, I think we need to be very careful that the paralysing hand of finance, as he calls it, does not take too much hold as we manage our budget position now. We need to be innovative at the same time now that we need to manage our money. And austerity for its own sake is not going to work. We need to appoint a new Chief Technical Officer who can manage the use of digital technologies across the public service. We need to use cloud computing. We need to get our internet regulations right. We need to make our public data freely available as possible so the private sector can use it for whole new services that we can then use. More than anything else, we need the permanent government to understand that the new economy is the green economy and the digital economy, and lose the attitude that computers, I'm not too sure if they're going to really take off as a technology. This is the future. And it should grasp that and understand it to its core and start working to achieve it. I'm convinced that if we make those 3 broad changes in how our citizens engage with politics, in how we run local government, and in how we run our public service, we can and will recover. I'm confident in the skills and the resources and the democratic and political institutions in this state, and actually the regard that the Irish people have for this state, even if there's a disconnect in how we vote. I remember as a young child, I climbed up very high up a tree. Young kids don't do it these days, but in my time we did. I remember at one point just being very scared. I climbed too high, the wind had started, and suddenly the branches are swaying, and oh my God, I could fall from this very high place. And the way down wasn't as easy or as obvious as it was when you were going the way up. And I think as a country, we've been in a similar place for the last 4 years. Climbed up very high, and we did not know how we were going to get down. We've started climbing down out of that dangerous position. People can be critical of the political system, for the steps of the way down that we took. Some people were arguing, we should jump. But at a certain height, jumping is scary, and you think, no, I think we can work this branch here. I'm going to make our way down. Whatever about the political point scoring that existed or went on the last government, or the last opposition parties engaged with my party, when we were opposition, I wish the new government well. And I want to see them continue to get us safely down the tree in the manner that they're doing it. I think we're getting closer to the bottom. I think we'll reach the ground soon, whether it's in a shorter jump or whether it's in a few steps. I think we will get there. I know that we're in a scared state, but I don't believe we're a failed state. I'm sometimes wary when I hear talk of elites. I don't know, elites. I'm always taken by the line like the centre cannot hold. I think in my sense of this time in Irish politics, the centre has held. We will get out of this difficult time. And that's not a bad thing. However, at the same time, that centre, the political centre, must recognise that it has to change its shape completely. Recognising, yes, that there are flaws in our system. And yes, that we have the chance now to start anew. Peter, I'd have to say, I'll end by disagreeing with you. That possibility is in our hands. All it takes is political will. Thank you.